Welcome to the Kids with Big Emotions podcast. I have a guest with me today, and I'm so excited. I have not done guest interviews for a while, and I'm bringing them back because of how much it allows us to really connect and show you so many other views of things outside of what I'm teaching you. And we're starting this with somebody amazing who actually this past week, Reesa interviewed me.
Mhm.
And so it was just super exciting being on that other end. And I'm so excited today to dive into everything with Reesa. So, Reesa, do you mind at all giving everybody a bit of an introduction as to what you do and who you are?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to chat with you today. As you mentioned, my name is Reesa Morala. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. Currently, I do practice in the state of California, providing therapy virtually as well as in person. And then I also do workshops that are virtual and available to pretty much anybody who has an internet connection. My specialty, my niche is I love supporting parents, and so that's my world is how best to be able to set us up as best as we can because they don't give us a manual for how to do this really hard thing called parenting. And so that's really where my heart lies. And that has come about. I'm a parent myself. I have two sons who are 11 and 8. I'm in it in the trenches too. And so being able to kind of give back to parents and be the support as they are supporting these kids to hopefully launch off and be successful and thriving, I have the honor and the pleasure to be able to support those awesome parents behind them.
Amazing. Oh my gosh. So many questions popped in my head as you were saying that. So, where shall we begin? So, can we start off talking about when we have two parents with different parenting styles?
So that is such a common challenge that I see come up. So if you identify with that, please know you are not alone and it does not mean that hope is not possible if that's the case. And I think for me what I find most often is many of this is just really shaped based off your own upbringing, what you see modeled, whether it's I don't want to do this because this is what I've experienced myself, or I do want to do this because I have seen that. Sometimes it's even this is all I know, this is all I've seen. And so, really, kind of the first step, and usually when we're talking about that, is really getting curious about what your style is and maybe where it's born out of. Again, is it more reactive or is it trying to be preventative and kind of figuring out what aligns for you so that then you have the words and the capability of being able to then come to the table and have a conversation about maybe kind of why it is that you believe in these areas and why it is so important to you, because I find oftentimes when we're talking about differences in parenting beliefs, we come from this place of just, it means so much to me, but I'm not necessarily communicating that to my partner. And so then when our partner says something that's maybe counter our belief, the instinct is to kind of go to defense because parenting is such a personal thing. And sometimes it can be easy to hear maybe feedback that's different than ours and think of it as a reflection that you're saying that, oh, my beliefs are wrong. And most people's instincts are to go, no, 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 I'm going to fight for this belief. And so really just having the words to be able to kind of come to the table and get to the underside of it, of why this is so important, and being able to kind of come to your partner just as you want them to come to you, which is that openness and that curiosity and being willing to kind of dialogue. Those are definitely some of the biggest challenges that I see to come up when we're talking about those different parenting styles.
Yeah. And the thing too is we may have these beliefs and never really thought why, and
Mhm.
they've just been how it was. And
Yes.
so we've never even tried to think why or if there is another way quite often because I remember when I started dating and was with my husband, I assumed everybody grew up the same way with me as I did. Everyone had the same rules and regs. And I think Well, no, I don't know this at all. I'm going to no, I was going to say assume my situation. Let's just talk about. So, in my experience, I made an assumption that when I was getting into this marriage, that we would just automatically parent the same because I assumed I made so many assumptions.
Mm.
And it's fascinating when you start getting into that wait, but they are doing this different. And so now how do we navigate this because it is so different without truly understanding why it's even important to us to do it the one way? Is it because it's the way it's always been done, or do we really want to do it that way as well?
Absolutely. And I love that part that you were talking about, that awareness, because even, going into that further, that there's a high likelihood, if we don't have that awareness yet and we haven't really sat down and maybe done some of that curious exploration, that our partner might do, say, parent in a way that brings up something for us internally. And then if we don't have that awareness of, hey, what is it bringing up and why is it hitting me in this way, that it then becomes that reactive. And now we're reacting and we're potentially having a fight with our parent partner that really maybe could have been avoided or even just slowed down just a little bit for us to kind of meet from that place of just, hey, let me get curious about this. What is going on for you? What's going on for me? And instead, we take that reactivity and then now we veered off topic and we're now fighting about the dishes when really at the root of it, right, it started out as just like, oh man, that really struck a chord with me and I'm not sure why. And it really just landed. And I'm curious and want to go into that. Would you be willing to kind of explore that with me? And so now we can again go back to that, having that dialogue versus potentially some of those assumptions, which again, assumptions, they're so natural, and I wanna just normalize that because this is what I do. I've been doing this for quite some time now, and I myself have to kind of check in and go, "Oh, yeah, I'm totally going into assumption land right now."
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that because this is so important for people to understand. I know I was speaking with somebody the other day, and oh, you know what? It was actually on your podcast when we were talking, and I was talking about, situations and things that we would do. And I said, just so everybody knows, it's not always this perfect. This is not how it always ends. And so,
Yeah.
as you were saying this about this, this question popped in my mind for you is okay, so you're trained in this. You're
Mhm.
trained in this before you had kids.
Yes.
And then kids came into play. You had all of these tools under your belt. Flat out, how often did you mess up still? I want people to understand this.
I mess up on a daily basis.
Yes, right? Because you're
I mean, just to
human.
put it out there.
That's it. And this
Yeah.
is what we need people to know, right? Like,
Mm.
I teach all of this stuff. You teach all of this stuff. Like, I'm teaching stress management. And somebody the other day was shocked that I've yelled at my kids sometimes. And it's like, it happens, you know?
Mhm.
It happens differently than it used to happen, but it still happens sometimes, right? Like, nobody's perfect. And even when we have this bag of tools, there's often other pieces that come in that we didn't know we had to add into our toolbox until we're in a situation.
Absolutely. And I think that you hit it spot on in the fact that because our kids are constantly growing, they're constantly trying new things. That means we're being exposed as parents to constant growing and constant, new things that we haven't parented before. And so now there's potential, I had gone through my education and my program, my own therapy before becoming a parent. And so there were many topics that me and my parent partner had ahead of time that aren't your standard that many folks miss. But even then, our child came into the world and sent us for a loop and exposed us to things that we could have planned all day and would have never thought to talk about or thought to plan for, because that's exactly it. Like there's so many things that are going to come up that challenge what you already might have in your toolbox and provide an opportunity that we can either go, okay, I've got to figure out how to adapt and how to work with this. Or, that's when you get some of the dissonance when we're like, I don't want to change. Change is so hard and change is so scary that we kind of get that resistance and you get into that struggle, whether it's with your parent partner, whether it's with your own child, because it's going to challenge you on a daily basis. And yes, I have lost it with my children numerous times throughout, their growing up life. And just because this is what I do on a daily basis has not made me immune to the failures of just I'm so human every
Yeah.
single day.
Yeah. I feel like one thing with me, so in my entire career, I've always been in health and wellness. And when I've said with any client at anything, if it's like health and fitness, when it was like stress, burnout, when I'm doing traumas, anything, when I know that a client is successful, what I think success is when they notice that they've fallen off or they notice that the tools either aren't working or they've stopped using tools or things like that. And then they know how to pivot and make the changes. So, really simple example, I'm just going to use drinking water just because it's not kid related and there's too many factors with kids. But with just drinking water, if we think about drinking water, when we fall off, does it take you 2, 3 days to realize that you're starting to get brain foggy, getting a little moody, or your body's aching, you're not sleeping? Or does it take you a week, a month, or 6 months to figure it out? And so you know that you're getting better and better at it when it takes you less and less and less time to notice that a behavior is happening and to notice, okay, what do I need to do to get back on? Does this mean, like, I feel that with therapists as well, you can get to a point where you're like, okay, I'm good to practice and implement and everything on my own for a while. And
Mhm.
then another stage of life happens. Something else happens, stress starts piling on, or another total situation where you start realizing different triggers that had not been triggered before. Like, okay, time to go back. I need to go back to that toolbox. I need to go back and revisit that. Or I need to go
Mhm.
back to my stress tools. I need to go back to my sleep. I need to go back to, executive functioning, like whatever it is, we need to go back to those things because
Yeah.
once you have a toolbox, it doesn't mean you carry it around with you every single day. It gets heavy. And sometimes you leave some tools behind that you have to go back and pick up.
Absolutely. And sometimes we need a different tool for that particular circumstance, and we just never added that. And
Mhm.
that's okay too. And so being able, like you said, I think that that's such a great nugget to be able to kind of mention that as far as therapy, that so many times there is kind of that idea, right? That I finish therapy, I graduate, and oh, I'm done, I'm cured, and that nothing's ever gonna go wrong again. And so really just being able to kind of open yourself up that it's okay too, that there are gonna be times where something happens that's completely unprepared and wasn't even on your radar to prepare for.
Yeah.
And so we might need to go back and find, maybe get a little bit creative with the tools and figure out something else that's going to meet you in exactly where you're at. And it is absolutely kind of that awareness of being open and willing and saying, oh yeah, I'm kind of missing that, or maybe I do need a little bit of a reset or a reminder. I mean, just like our kids need reminders to do their chores or what have you, that reminder of checking back in with your person, right? That's able to kind of hold you a little bit more accountable and go, oh yeah, we did, talk about that, or get creative and maybe problem solve with you exactly in the way that you're needing at that particular moment in time. And so, yes, I have plenty of clients where they do exactly that. They are feeling stable, they are feeling good. We're all in agreement that I think you're ready to kind of go forth and try out these things that you've been working so hard on. And if you need, a check-in 6 months down the road, a year down the road, that's totally okay. And they'll come back and maybe we'll do just like a 1 to 2 kind of refresher and they're like, "Oh yeah, okay, I get it again." And you see kind of that confidence level to be able to just do, kind of that check-in and be like, "Okay, I'm good. I'm ready to kind of go back in and that's okay too."
And the thing as well is when you are doing it doesn't if it's therapy where you're doing a lot of like vulnerable mental work, or it is executive functioning stuff with your kids, or it is working on your stresses, whatever it is, you sometimes need bits and breaks from it. You need to allow your nervous system to realign. You need the time to implement what you've learned. And so sometimes you need those little bits of breaks. And that's what I say. Like in my support circle, I'm like, stay as long as you want. You can either sit back and you can take some breaks where you're not in it at all and you can actually exit from the group for a bit and come back. Or you can just sit in the background just in case because you're not ready to fully leave, but you know that your brain can't handle like working on the stuff and going through all the material like all the time. But you know that there's that you can come in and ask a question if you really do need. You can stay in there for that. And you can go through all the different seasons that happen.
Mhm.
And we have to honor that. It's not about push, push, push all the time.
Yes. Honor, and I think just giving ourselves a little bit of grace,
Mm,
and permission to name that need in that moment, and that's totally okay.
yeah. And so, another thing though, so what if you don't have a lot of tools in your toolbox yet? How much guilt should you have, and how worried should you be about what could happen to your kids? What, like, if are you going to be damaging? You know, it's funny as I'm saying this because in my mind, I think we're all going to mess up our kids in one way or another. We just need to give them the supports, which
Yeah.
is where my one son, my other won't go. My one son has a therapist that I'm like, you don't really need anything at this moment, but why don't we get her to know you, understand where you're at, work through some of your things. That way, when there is something that pops up that either is about dad or I, that you don't want to talk with us, or you're not comfortable talking with us and you want to work it with somebody else, you already have her in your back pocket. So
Mhm.
I always feel we should do that because I've told my son, I'm going to mess up. So, and I have a toolbox. So, what
Yeah.
do you say to somebody who doesn't have a toolbox that is feeling guilt or shame or worry that they're now realizing that they do have traumas? Like all of us have childhood traumas, that they do have them and they're maybe starting to work on them, but they're worried about the guilt and the shame of not having that toolbox yet.
And that guilt and shame, we are so, so good. I feel like if we could just encapsulate how good we are at like giving ourselves guilt and shame and kind of use it for all these things that we want to do, we would be so powerful. And so honestly, I always tell folks it's never too late to make a repair. In fact, children are probably some of the most forgiving souls on this planet. And so all the shame and the guilt that, you might be kind of dishing out to yourself, the likelihood that your children are kind of looking at you in that lens is fairly slim. And so when folks come to me, I always let them know you're probably doing all the shaming and guilting. There's no need for me to pile on to that. That's not going to take us anywhere. If you're anything like me, it's probably loud and strong already. I'm not going to be anybody that's going to like pile onto you. And so really again going back to that idea of that grace, that same compassion that we would offer our children when they mess up, being able to know that it's so okay for us to give ourselves that same grace and that same forgiveness. And just the mere fact that you're willing to even go, maybe there's something else that is happening here, or maybe there are tools that I'm missing. Just even that piece is putting you leagues ahead as far as awareness, that you'd be even willing to say that, because you could very easily go, la la la, I don't hear it, I don't see it, and just keep going. And so even that awareness of that there's something there, and maybe really leaning into that, as it sounds like maybe your body is wanting to go somewhere different. And are there ways that we can give ourselves permission to go into that bond and know that it's okay to go in there and ask for some of those needs and those wants to be met? So many times I find again, another thing that parents are really good at is giving ourselves, kind of this guilt. Well, if I go and I spend this time, if I go and ask for help, is that going to say something about me, call out that I am a failure, or would that be selfish to take some of that time? And I always tell folks, I I used to actually work in hospital settings, and seeing kind of the highest acuity of adolescence. And I have never, ever, ever treated a child that was coming in with struggles because their parent took time to care for their own needs. Never, ever.
Can you repeat
Have
that? Because that's really important. Really
Yeah.
important. Repeat that again, please.
I have never, ever treated a child with struggles who was coming in because their parent took too much time to care for themselves and their needs.
That's so important. Yeah. I've never thought of it from that lens before. Such an important lens. So fascinating. Because, yeah, a lot of our stuff just spirals down. And depending on the child, depends on if one child feels it while another child may be like, oh, that's fine. Like that's just what mom or dad is like. Whereas the other one takes it very personally and emotionally and feels it deeply.
Yeah.
It can all be so different. I don't know. Are your kids different from one another?
Oh, they absolutely are.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other thing that makes it so challenging. We
Mhm.
talk about parenting differences between partners. There's also what works with one kid is the likelihood that you're going to need something different for your other child or other children is high because they're their own unique individual. Their brains process things differently. They are responding to the world differently. And so that's a challenge in itself because again, I'm with my older child, we definitely got into a group of like, okay, I think I'm figuring this out. I think I know what to do. And then enter in my second child who was like, "Oh, you think you know what you're doing?" Yeah, no, you don't. That's really funny.
Yeah.
And that's exactly, it. And so that's a whole mother kind of challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. That was mine too. I thought, the first one, I was like, okay, this is a learning curve. I'm good. And after the first, I'm like, okay, I know what I'm going to be. I know how this is going to go. Yeah. And it just absolute opposite, right? Just completely. And it's fascinating the differences in the two of them and the differences the way we need to parent both of them. And my husband, he very easily parents one of them, and the other one is where I'm so proud of him that recently he'll sometimes come up here and go, okay, I need to tag you in because I don't know what to do at this moment. And then he'll talk to me after and go, okay, what did you do? Why was he upset? What happened? Like, I didn't get it at all. Because they would get into like, they just start getting upset with each other. Meanwhile, neither of them understands why the other one's upset. And funny thing is there's some similarities between the two of them and they both don't understand it. And I'm
Yeah.
just super proud of my husband because he has been putting in the work to be like, okay, what do I need to do on my end to start trying to understand this child who has turned me for a loop and made this like, he's like, I get my other child easily. How can I get one and not the other? And that alone has taken him some work to get his head around and get his head around the emotions of being able to understand one and not understand the other,
Mhm.
and then being okay and vulnerable enough to come to me and say, I'm stuck right now. Like, I'm beyond proud of my husband, beyond, for getting to that point and tagging me in. And then after calmly asking me, okay, explain that to me so that I can understand for next time. And what can I do for next time? Like, that's huge. But for us to get there has been a while,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, absolutely. And just that part of even the awareness again, we're, going back to that piece of that it is getting too much and allowing ourselves that permission to say, I need to take a step back.
Mm-hmm.
That in itself is a component and can take a really long time to do that and battle even just with the mindset that if I tag someone else in or if I take a step back doesn't mean that I'm a failure. It doesn't mean that I, am somehow flawed in a really, unsafe way. Like my brain is going, I don't want to say that about myself because does that define my character? And so it's such a mindset shift to be able to kind of go into that and to say some of those things out loud. Absolutely. And I think kind of as you said, these are things that take time, and it's intentional time of being willing to go in there and try it out and try it out again and try it out again. And then the times that you mess up, which you're going to, I say that all the time too, that, you know, we're going to mess our kids up. We just get to decide in which areas and, in what ways. Right. And that when we mess up, being able to then also come back and say, yeah, I totally could have handled that differently. And so I want to come to you and I'm sorry that, you did not get the best of me in those moments. And so can I try that again?
Yeah.
Most kids that I have seen, most families that I've worked with, the kids are like, yeah, let's try that again, and they're so willing and they're so receptive to us trying something different and being able to normalize messing up. It also gives them permission to mess
Mhm.
up and then also making a habit to come back and own that.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of things. So, and I have to try to remember both. So the one was where we all have different likes and dislikes, things that we have tolerances for, things that we don't. And it's kind of just expected or assumed that we should have a really high tolerance for our kids, that we should just have a high tolerance for all kids and all of these things. And like you have teachers that they did choose a career to spend 24/7 with, well, not 24/7, but like Monday to Friday, 9 to 3 with these kids plus extra hours. And then sometimes come back to their own kids. And some of these teachers are totally fine with that. They have the bandwidth to do that. And some go into it and realize that they don't. And that's okay. The thing is when it's our own children and we may be feeling like I can't handle this much time with my own child, there can be guilt. Whereas, like, so for me, I love being around the kids. I homeschool them. I can't get enough of it. That's me though. Like I love diving into the different personalities and the neurodiversities and helping with all these, like that's just me and how my brain works, and it tends to click that way. That does not mean that somebody who like needs to have a job and a career to go out of the house and stuff and get that break, it doesn't make either of them a bad person. These are the things too, that there's these expectations of parenting where you should have these kids and you should want them and love them and want to be around them like 24/7 kind of thing, that I think we need to change that narrative, because everybody has different personalities. Like there's some people that love going to their job and could do it 24/7, and there's other people that are like, how do you even go in for a day and do that?
Mhm.
And we don't think that our kids should kind of be the same in that sense, where we're going to have different, some people are going to like diving into the personalities and diving into the mood swings and diving into the behaviors, and some people don't have any interest in that.
Yeah.
And so it is going to be harder for some, and people, what a relationship with your child is going to look like will be different for one person versus not for one spouse versus another spouse. My husband
Yeah.
could not be home 24/7 and homeschooling these kids. He couldn't. And
Mhm.
that's okay. He's an amazing dad. Even
Yeah.
with less time with the kids than I have, that's okay. The kids love him just as much.
Absolutely. And I think what's important about that is when we allow ourselves to own that piece of it, then maybe I do need some of the break. For example, as I was hearing you talk about this, one thing that comes up for me on my end and is that my my husband and my children, I always joke, I always say it must be like something passed down in his genetics because his father's the same way, where they love, love, love to just talk, and they could talk for days and days and days and days. Well, I'm a talk therapist. I literally go to work and I listen to people talk. And I love doing what I do. And then when I come home and my husband just wants to talk and talk and talk, but then my child also wants to talk and talk. And then my other child wants to come. At some point, I have to go, I just need a pause. I just need a moment of just nobody talking and just can I have some space? Just give me 10 minutes, please. And being able to do that at first, my instinct, I felt like such an awful person to kind of come back and not have the capacity to just listen to them, on end. And I wanted to, my heart was there. I wanted to, but there was just something physically within me. And I found within that me taking those 5-10 minutes and actually being able to kind of speak up for my own needs and recognize that it's okay for me to say, hey, can I just have 10 minutes just to decompress my mind and know what that might look like? It has allowed me to come back to that and say, okay, I now have a little bit more capacity to
Mhm.
show up in the way that my heart wants me to show up that I couldn't in the moment. And so it was finding those creative ways to build that into my needs, and it allowed me more space to support then their needs and how I wanted to show up for them. And so, just allowing some of that, again, permission, that grace that it's okay for us to speak in that. And oftentimes when we're able to get those needs met, it allows us and just like frees us up so much to be able to then show up for our children, for our family members in the ways that probably are more in alignment with our values and where our soul and our heart's at.
Yeah, and our kids mirror us. And
Mhm.
when we say it in ways that is like, I'm just gonna go do this for a little while because I want to be at my best for you. I'm not listening to you the way that you deserve right now. I'm gonna go take a break so that I can come back and give you the attention you deserve. They start learning that when somebody steps away, it's not always a bad thing. It's not always a negative. It's not that somebody doesn't want to be around you. If it's worded in ways as well that you want to become better for them. So you need to take this time for you. And I find my kids mirror that sometimes now, where they
Oh
will.
yeah.
I'm just going to go to my room for a little while. I just need, some time to myself for a little bit. I'm like, okay, we're here whenever
Mhm.
you want. And I'm like, okay. And yeah, it's fascinating. I love it. I love it so much just how when we do show them these things, and as you said, we have to get creative at times depending on the stage. I'm at a stage right now where I can even leave the house if I needed, and my kids are fine. But there were stages where I had to be in the same room with them still, and I solo parent a lot. So it's where, I mean, I could be in the next room and tell them I just need this for 20 minutes, set a timer so they know, and all of that stuff. So you have to be creative on what you can get when you can get based on the stage that the kids are in.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think sometimes we can get stuck in, especially with so much of like the self-care, that goes out and is like self-care is giving yourself like a spa treatment. Some people are looking at that, I can't afford that, or I don't have the time for that. And so really that creativity and allowing, more of that to get out there. Let's break that it needs to look a certain way and it has to look the same for everybody, but that your self-care could look a little bit different. Sometimes it is just saying no, maybe to that extra, activity or that extra sport. I have so many parents where sometimes there's that they get stuck in that, oh, in order to be the best parent that I can be, I need to be able to give my kids as many sports as their heart desires. And so then their weekends are completely filled up with this thing and that thing and that thing. And so sometimes some of that care, even just for your whole family, is saying no to that one extra event so that you can then show up a little bit differently and more present for these other events that maybe are in more alignment. Or sometimes it is a 5 second kind of, let me just have my coffee and my tea and just smell the aromas that are coming, and just that 5 seconds of allowing myself that, maybe you've got the child in one arm and you have that cup of coffee, and just that simple, kind of breathing in is giving yourself that permission to just take that 5 seconds, 5 more seconds of the kid crying. I, as a therapist, I'm telling you, is not going to mean that they're set off poorly for the rest of their life. I'm saying that extra 5 seconds, 10 seconds, they will be okay. And like you said, it is modeling that it is also okay for them to speak their need and to have that need seen, honored, and valued even. And that someone taking that time is not a reflection of their worth and their value because
Mm.
they're investing in themselves as I want them to invest in themselves, as I want to be able to invest in myself as well.
Yeah, and exactly what it looks like is so different for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's where, you can get this whole list and nothing on that list may either work for you or be what you actually is something that you feel actually is giving you that time. Like so
Mhm.
for me, my love language is quality time. So for me, sometimes it will be hopping on a Zoom call, even doing this interview to me like fills my bucket. Right. To me,
Yeah.
this is quality self time because I'm having a deep conversation with somebody about stuff I love to talk about.
Yeah.
But this to me could be self-care even though it's actually work.
Mhm.
My husband's downstairs making dinner right now. The kids are, like, setting the table and doing their things downstairs, and I'm not a part of it at all. Like, I don't have to
Mhm.
be. I'm up here having a conversation with you, and that, to me, fills my bucket. And so what fills somebody's bucket can be so different than
Yes.
someone else. Even I'm thinking too, honestly, coloring with my kids, getting out a bunch of coloring books, all of us coloring except for one that's the perfectionist because going outside the lines he'll get pissed. But if I'm with the other one, we'll just sit and color and he's quiet. He won't really even talk and we'll listen to a podcast or have music on. And to me, that I love, even though I'm still with one of my kids, I feel like I'm getting what I need in that moment.
Absolutely. I
Mhm.
think so one of the ones that I get asked about frequently is kind of, what's something that I do for fun? And one of the things that I love and fills my cup that's actually a great tool that we've been able to incorporate in our family is dance parties. So I have my childhood background is in dance, and so that's something that we have incorporated, but it fills me too that when, tempers are rising, those emotions, you're feeling that thermometer go up, we just throw on just a song with a nice dance beat, and it's just move your body in whatever you're feeling in that moment, and the kids get involved, and then when you're dancing long enough, the movements turn into something funny, and then next thing you know, we're all laughing, and then we're continuing to play music even though that song is done. And so in those ways, it's meeting all of those needs for me. It's work I'm connecting with my children. I'm helping regulate my own emotional, system. I'm helping they're regulating as well. And we're getting our bodies moving and doing something. And that's one of the ways, like you were saying, kind of the creativity of what self-care looks like. There's no one way. And so if there you need to get a little creative, that's okay too. Please don't let anybody tell you that you're doing self-care wrong because it's self for a reason. It's not anybody else's care, it's
Yeah.
your own self.
And self-care can even be if your kids are playing in the mud and jumping in puddles that you join them,
Yes.
right? Get yourself as muddy and dirty as you can be as well. With your kids, that might be complete self-care. Like, it's so individual and in the moment, and if you have this inkling or the thought in your mind that, "Oh, that would be fun," before the other part of your mind steps in and goes, "Nope, you've got too many things to do. You don't have time, or you shouldn't join them because of this, this, and this." Stop it and just go join it. And that can be your self-care.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's also get letting that inner child, right?
Yeah.
Have some of that. We get so good and oftentimes it happens right around that, young adult kind of phase where that creativity, that instinct to kind of be playful, we then get into the adult world and the adult world tells us, "Oh, you don't have time for that. Shut it down." And so when we kind of lean into that and just allow that piece to have its space and time, we're giving that inner child permission to
Mhm.
lean into that fun and that playfulness and that curiosity and that just joy of allowing yourself to be in just the way that you are and having that be enough.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Risa, I know like we've talked a lot about the parents and the parenting, And I know we could probably do a whole other episode on kids with big emotions and how to parent them and how to help them. And I know we don't have time. So we do have to start wrapping this up. So, is there a question that I should have asked you or something that popped in your mind that you felt that we really should have talked about that we haven't talked about yet?
Gosh, that's a great question.
Take your
I don't
time.
know if there's anything in specific. I think I would, if anything, just go back to just this idea of finding those ways, those creative ways to allow a little bit of curiosity about yourself, about your partner, even about your children, and what that would look like. And even if it's just a couple minutes of that curiosity, a little bit at a time, and we gradually build that up, are there ways that you could work that in and move towards the curiosity instead of the assumptions, and having that be okay? I think one of the things that for me really resonated, someone once said, instead of kind of cutting out the cookies, are there ways that we can add the veggies? And so that's just it, that when you're finding yourself wanting to make some of those changes and move towards something different, change does not happen overnight. And if we go towards the like, well, I just need to stop, or I should be doing all these things, those words of what I should be doing. That, gosh, that's so hard to live up to that expectation. And so then when we get in that mindset, it feels defeating. And so then we don't want to go into it. So instead, are there things that we want to add? And we just start in little increments
Mhm.
of just maybe start today with 5 minutes of just a little bit of that curiosity of, oh, what would that look like? Or you talked about playing in the mud. Okay, maybe today you give yourself that 5-minute permission. And then maybe tomorrow it's 6 minutes, and so on and so forth until you get a little bit more comfortable, because I think we are so used to telling ourselves to stop or what we should be doing that it feels uncomfortable when we lean into some of these other things. And so, get a little bit more comfortable a little bit at a time, and that's totally okay. There is time for us to make those changes, even if your kids are adults, that going back to them, I mean, gosh, I grew up in an emotionally immature, kind of abusive household. I think even now as an adult, if my parents were to come back and just say and own some of that and say, gosh, man, I didn't give you the best that I could. And I'm so sorry, and I want to try something different. Would you be willing to let me try something different? I think even now I would say, yeah, I would love that. Let's try something different.
Mhm.
And, and I think sometimes we forget about that part, that sometimes it can feel really hopeless of, oh man, I didn't have these tools in my toolbox. And does that mean there's no point? And so then we kind of go, oh, well, I've already done it this long. Maybe I'll just stick in it. And so really just kind of, if anything sticks, of just it's not too late, and then being able to say, I'd like to try something different. I don't know what that different looks like right now, but I'm open and I'm curious about what that difference would look like.
Yeah. And if we're even tying that in with kids with big emotions, when after your child has a big emotional meltdown, if there was something that you did during that meltdown that like triggered them as well, going back and saying, that didn't really work well.
Mm,
Should we try something else? And letting
yeah.
them start helping you with solutions too with your kids. It's okay to ask them for ideas on, I'm kind of stuck on how to help you with this. What do you think would be best when they're in that situation? What do you think I should try? And asking them and getting that curiosity with our kids as well as with our spouse, with all of the different parenting and things as well. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love that collaboration. That's probably my biggest tool in my toolbox that I use frequently with my children, because there are many times where I go, I feel like I've exhausted what I have. I'm so super curious because it seems like it's not landing. Can you help me? Like what would land better for you? What would work better for you? And they sit down, and even sometimes I have parents who go, "Oh, my child, I don't know if they could really grasp that." You'd be amazed the things that children would be willing to kind of sit down and go, "Okay, let's think about that." And then again, going back to that modeling, models that ability of sitting down and that collaboration is okay and asking for help is okay. And, really trying to rewrite and reparent the world that these things that maybe were sold to us as being weaknesses or making us, somehow inadequate are actually it's totally okay. And how can we kind of reintroduce that collaboration, that curiosity, that asking for our needs back into society. And I think if we could do a little bit more of that every single day, oof, I mean, the amount of change that I believe that we are capable of is just huge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. All right. We could definitely go on like this forever. We do need to end this episode. We will have the one on your podcast as well, so we can go into both of those. I will definitely be putting all of your links in the show notes. So anybody that wants to reach out to Reesa, they will be in the show notes. But for now, if they want to get in your group, because only those that want to work privately with you, they have to live in California, I'm assuming.
So for any therapy
Yes.
related services, yes, currently I have to be in the state of California.
And then your group, though, is for anybody anywhere in the world.
Yes.
Amazing. And that is on the link that you gave us that we will be putting in the show notes.
Best way to find it, you can embrace renewal therapy.
Okay.
Everything that you could possibly think of related to all the services is on there.
Amazing. And I highly encourage everybody to check out Risa's podcast. It is mixing food. She's always cooking, which amazes me that you can actually cook and ask questions and listen at the same time. So she's cooking a recipe that the guest has given her. She has all kinds of recipes for busy moms as well as phenomenal information from other moms on there. So I highly recommend you all check that out. So thank you so much, Risa, for being here with us today.
Yes, thank you very much for having me.
All right. Thank you, everybody. That is it for today's episode. If you would like to work with me or be in my support circle, all of the links for that as well are in the show notes. And we will see you in the next episode.